Immanuel Kant's influence has been very great. His so-called categorical imperative and its implications, which were formulated in 1785, informed some very important documents of the 20th century, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, written after the end of World War II, the Political and Economic Covenants of 1966, and the International Criminal Court of 2002. And just to give you the flavor of this deontological way of thinking, you can see it in application to various issues that we've touched on thus far. For example, from the deontological point of view, punishment can be justified even when doing so does not maximize overall happiness. That is, we mentioned the deterrent as well as the retributivist theories of punishment, and the Kantian approach, the deontological approach, would certainly be a retributivist theory in the sense that punishment can be justified even if doing so does not maximize happiness, and yet we nevertheless think that it's justified from the deontological point of view because, for example, punishing the perpetrator involves treating him with respect, and maybe also the victim. In our example of Dr. Jones and Rufus, it would be clear from the Kantian point of view that Dr. Jones should not euthanize Rufus, even if doing so saves the lives of 10 child prodigies. In the example of the mayor of Chicago dealing with a terrorist who's planted bombs all around the city, the deontological view would say the mayor of Chicago must not torture the terrorist's daughter, no matter the number of lives that might be saved if she or he does. We might also ask from the Kantian point of view, are there ever any restrictions on the conditions under which, for example, suicide might be permissible? Ways of treating ourselves, not just others, fall under the rubric of deontological ethics. Now, this idea of the formula of the end in itself is something central to Kantian thinking, so here's the way he puts it. Act in such a way that you always treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never simply as a means, but always at the same time as an end. Never simply as a means, but always at the same time as an end. So let's talk for a moment about what it means to use people. Kant is here distinguishing between two ways of doing so. You could use somebody as a means, or you could use somebody as a mere means. To take the former example, I could use somebody as a means when, for example, I go to a bank and go up to a teller and I ask to make a withdrawal from my account. I'm using that teller as a means to getting my hands on some cash that I want to use, but there's nothing particularly ethically problematic about that. Nothing particularly ethically troubling about that kind of interaction. Whereas if I use somebody as a mere means, then in a way I'm not respecting them as an individual. In a way I'm using them just as a tool for my own purposes that does not provide any respect for their own autonomy, their own nature as a person. So for example, to take a different case, if you and I are walking along the street and I see a car coming by that looks like it's a place from which bullets are about to emerge, somebody's pulling out a gun and they're starting to fire. If I now knock you over and use you as a shield while hiding behind you, let you take the bullets rather than me, that I'm using you as a mere means, as sort of the hunk of matter, so to speak, that's in front of me that I'm using in order to protect myself from being killed. That is a relationship that Kant would say is problematic because there's no sense in which I'm respecting you as an autonomous individual. And also, Kant will say that there are ways in which you might treat yourself as a mere means. So famously, he had remarks about suicide, and Kant says that if you think about committing suicide, what you're probably doing is assuming that the right action is one that will allow you to put your own misery away. That is to say, get over your troubles, get over your misery because, for example, someone you loved broke up with you or something very bad has happened and has made you very depressed. If your choice is to commit suicide in order to solve the problem, then you're using your own self as a means to the end of seizing your pain, getting your pain to stop. And Kant would say that is ethically troubling as well. We might also wonder, and I hope our discussion will come back to the question later on in this course, whether or not there are ever any conditions under which it's morally acceptable to commit suicide, but Kant is clear that there's at least some types of acts of suicide that are morally troubling and that violate this idea of using people as a mere means. Kant, notice, has something to say in application to ourselves and our treatment of ourselves, not just to others. Now, we might also think about how this way of thinking applies to the case of people having a debate. Suppose two people are having a debate about a question, and perhaps it's being judged by an audience. The audience will decide with votes as to which side has the best case, who's done the best job in supporting their case on some controversial contemporary topic, for example. Most of us would go into a debate like this thinking that a debate should be won or lost on the merits of each speaker's arguments. And that's different from what sorts of the other kinds of ways in which somebody might, so to speak, win or try to win a debate. That is to say, we have a firm sense of what kinds of tactics would be dirty. For example, personal insults, ad hominem attacks that point out, for example, that the speaker is in a way hypocritical because even though she is, take an example we've discussed before, even though she is arguing that smoking is dangerous and should be taxed more highly in order to pay for the health care costs that the country has to incur in order to respond to the diseases that smoking causes. If somebody were to point out that she's a smoker herself, that would be an ad hominem attack that would not be a proper response to the nature of the debate and the topic of the debate. By contrast, clean tactics require proper content of discussion as well as proper direction of that discussion. So you can think of, in the case of debaters, ways in which there's a sort of, there's a contest here, but there's a way of fighting clean and a way of fighting dirty. And when we fight dirty, what we're doing is essentially misusing the enterprise, exploiting it for our purposes of winning in order to triumph, but at the same time not respecting the other interlocutors in the debate, because what we're doing is bypassing what should implicitly be understood as the appropriate rules for this kind of exchange, and doing so just in order to succeed, in order to prevail. And Kant again would say, here's a case of playing dirty, even if the result is that you win.